This setup right here, no accessories, no monitors, no external batteries, just one solid wireless mic receiver and a few compact cinema lenses could be good enough to shoot your next film, whether that be documentary, short, web series, or feature film. And that is what makes this camera release more exciting than any other video camera in recent memory. Forget all the cameras with numbers attached to their names because they all are not alike. Today, we're going full alphabet with the Nikon ZR. Only 4 short years ago, Samuel Peter Nikinen released a music video calling all Nikon cameras potatoes. It catapulted him to superstardom. Well, amongst the YouTuber filmmaking super nerd community it did, and landed him an ongoing gig with Canon. It was a dark day for the Nikon brand, which he didn't even bother to pronounce correctly. It's Nikon. Like,
who are you? We are the knights who say
Nikon. And only an idiot would pronounce it incorrectly for an entire video.
It was a Nikon. Oh no, potato.
But what could Nikon do? This man was a lyrical genius. He managed to rhyme "oh no" with potato.
potatoes.
How could this camera giant compete with a rap devil? Especially because, well,
he's right, you know.
he didn't lie. Peter Samkinen was now a made man. But what about the bodies he left behind? The camera bodies. The Nikon camera bodies. Nikon were caught between a potato analogy and a hard place, trying to change the perception of their cameras. The potato thing got so out of hand, Potato Jet briefly considered changing his name to Nikon Jet. And as MJ would say,
it became personal with me.
Nikon still had ambitions as a rider. But how do you rebuild a brand who, in all fairness, was primarily an excellent photography brand, but just started wanting to get a piece of that video market? Well, it's super easy, barely an inconvenience. You just buy one of the biggest cinema camera companies on the planet. Nikon acquired Red Digital Cinema, the very same company in the midst of suing them for raw patent infringement over the design of their NRAW codec. Now that's how you squash a lawsuit. As Jay-Z would say, you don't buy out the bar, you buy the night spot. And then you wait. Because unlike the potatoes they were being compared to, revenge is a dish best served cold. So Nikon slowly integrated red tech into their Nikon lineup in the form of some new red LUTs and some Z-mount Komodo cameras, all very vanilla, all very safe. That is until their arch nemesis releases their very best FX3 clone, the Canon C50, and they released the full power of the Red Nikon Tech Fusion collaboration and instigated their roaring rampage of revenge. Oh yes, the first true Nikon Red camera. Samuel Peter Nikinen may be staying creamy, but now he will never experience the creamiest footage available on a mirrorless camera, that being Red Code RAW. And that, my friends, might just be a kill shot. It's true what they say. You either die a hero or live long enough to be the one left holding the potato. A very expensive potato. You see, the man shoots on Canon.
Potatoes.
And look, I'm not here to tell you the ZR is better than a Canon C50, but I'm kind of here to tell you it's better than a C50, especially if you consider the price difference for all the people looking for the FX3 killers with only $100 billers. And if that is too hot a take for you and too cold to hold, then let me just say the ZR is at least a lot more innovative than an FX3 2.0, aka Canon's new drop. So yeah, I think they're shook, scared to look at the streets that Nikon done took. And it should put the whole industry not just Canon on notice. This is not a cinema camera. This is not a cinema camera. Neither is this or this, but this just might be my cinema camera. Now, I'm not here to tell you to buy this camera, but I am going to tell you why I did. And I'm calling it right now. The ZR is going to be the new camera for indie shooters. You might even call it the second coming of the Canon 5D Mark III.
Ironic.
And for good reason. Let's cut right to the chase. Is this a real Red camera or is it just a tribute? Because I ain't gonna lie, as a former Red Komodo owner, this camera kind of feels like what we hoped the original Red Komodo would be. An accessible, compact, affordable pathway into the Red ecosystem and the best color science and raw format this side of an ARRI Alexa. Now this is a pretty extensive hands-on first impressions, and I'll be honest, this camera has melted my brain. It's not perfect, and we'll get into all of its shortcomings as well, but while it's not perfect, it is innovative in a way that we just haven't seen in a long time. And yes, it does really feel like a Red camera, except easier to use. I think this camera is a catalyst for the way cameras in general will begin to change over the coming years, and what we will come to expect even in our mirrorless hybrids. Now, why is the camera so special? Well, there are a number of factors, but the most obvious and most important has to be the inclusion of Red Code RAW. Now, I've said this in previous videos, but Red Code RAW is the best RAW codec other than ARRI. Better than B-RAW, which I think is excellent. Better than ProRes RAW, which is massive in terms of data rates, but also good. Red RAW is actually small for a RAW format, and it has a lot of information to adjust your image in post with more flexibility than the other two. Plus, and perhaps this is more important, it just has the red look, those red colors, the red vibes. This is the ultimate vibes camera, offering a kind of softness and highlight roll-off that you now freely associate with films and won't see anywhere else except on a camera with the red name in it. It kind of feels like there's a vintage quality built into its 6K image, something that immediately separates it from the Sony or Canon or Panasonic with their precision sharpness and their modern clinical digital look. It is distinctly not digital, not conventional, organic, 100% certified fresh, and above all else, interesting. And that might not be for everyone, but it is 100% for me. Now, is this a true Red Code RAW with the same amount of flexibility as in previous versions on bigger cameras? Obviously not. We've gone from 16 bits down to 12 bits, somewhere between a Super Nintendo and the OG NES. Oh boy, we've gone from Super Mario World to Super Mario Brothers. But at least in my first impressions, it's still better than the other brand alternatives, and it looks like it will match quite effortlessly with its bigger brothers. But that's assuming we're talking about competing against other RAW formats. The truth is, a great many of these mirrorless cameras don't have internal RAW. The Sony FX3, FX2, and FX6, for example, don't provide an internal RAW codec. And even shooting externally with ProRes RAW, it's probably not going to be able to match the quality of the ZR. Looking at the Canon cinema camera lineup on their best day, shooting Canon RAW light on the C70, C80, and beyond, it's probably not going to match the quality of this Red codec. And I'm speaking as someone who has used all of these cameras, who tested them to shoot on international documentaries with, who's owned them. I've seen them come, I've watched them go, I've watched them rise, I've witnessed it and watched them blow. Watch. And before we get all aggy in the comment section, no, I'm not talking about dynamic range versus these other cameras. I'm talking about what can you do to this image in post-production. Its color reproduction, and how it looks out in the field, not in a lab. Dynamic range can be very misleading. The Pixar 6K and Cinema Camera 6K full frame don't have amazing dynamic range, but they do have an amazing image, and their B-RAW in post can give you so much more than any compressed codec can. and a lot has been made about the mediocre dynamic range scores of the Nikon ZR, but looking at this image and making adjustments to it in post-production tell you a very different story. And this red code raw image for me is what makes the ZR so special. For years, I have wanted Blackmagic to create a camera of this type to match their fantastic image, but they've always just been shy of the mark. It's either an unrefined product needing new versions like the original Blackmagic Pocket OG, or something that's too chunky like the Pocket 6K lineup, a lineup that still requires a lot of accessories to have it running smoothly all day. The new Pixis 12K is no doubt excellent, but it's also a true step up in a different price bracket and in an actual cinema body. And I'll be honest, I've been spoiled by Blackmagic cameras. After working in B-raw with the Pocket 4Ks and 6Ks and Ursas, and then moving to Sony and Panasonic for their additional conveniences, it becomes painfully obvious how much worse their compressed style codecs are. Anyone who knows already knows. Once you go Blackmagic, you never go back from Blackmagic without noticing the trade-off in image quality. For years, I have thought to myself, man, if these cameras could give me this image, but with IBIS and with autofocus in a more practical size hybrid body without all these necessary add-ons, they would be unstoppable. And essentially, that is exactly what the Nikon ZR is. This video is not sponsored by Nikon, but it was made possible thanks to Skillshare. Skillshare is a platform for learning with classes designed to help you upskill in almost any area. Need to learn about cinematography? Take one of Zach Mulligan's courses. Want to improve your content on YouTube? Try MKBHD's breakdown on how to script, shoot, and edit videos. There's something for almost everyone on Skillshare. In fact, I was already a Skillshare member before the team even reached out to me to collaborate, and I have used their classes specifically for my work here on YouTube. One of my favorite classes is Photoshop Essentials, taught by Daniel Scott, an amazing Photoshop guru and fellow Antipodean. Daniel takes you through all the Photoshop tools in an engaging, easy to understand style that never feels overwhelming, while providing step-by-step exercises and examples to allow you to practice and familiarize yourself with each concept. Prior to taking this course, I had absolutely no understanding or knowledge of Photoshop, but I wanted to create thumbnails for my videos and additional marketing material for my feature films. I use the skills I learned through Skillshare every week to make the thumbnails you clicked on and to help promote my films across multiple platforms. I used to have to pay a graphic designer to tweak and reformat my posters for different social media platforms. Now I can do it myself, and I can even take a stab, no pun intended, at making my own. This month, they're providing a 30-day free trial to their platform along with 20% off your first year of membership, but the deal was only valid for the rest of November. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive 1 month free trial of Skillshare plus 20% off their first payment, so get started today. One of the best ways to sum up the ZR is to ask the question, what happens if the Nikon Z6 III got its freak on with a Blackmagic 6K full frame and had a camera baby with essentially almost all the benefits of both? Beyond the red raw format, its second best feature is its LCD screen, with the ZR bringing us a 1000 nit flip out 4-inch touchscreen, which for the first time in a mirrorless camera ever, I have felt comfortable using without a monitor. You don't get how big a difference that extra inch makes until it's right in your face. In fact, my entire testing weekend, I attached nothing but a lens to this camera. No monitor, no battery solution, no follow focus, no rail system, no matte box, and I can't tell you how liberating that felt. And in some ways it seems so obvious you wonder why nobody else thought of it, until you realize that Blackmagic did. They were the first to recognize and offer a truly excellent screen on their cameras. The problem was the size of the screen inhibited the rest of the camera from being a convenient size. They just didn't keep revising it. Nikon's version is an absolute stroke of genius and immediately makes it feel better to shoot with than the hybrid mirrorless offerings from any of its competition. But Nikon didn't stop there, as it's also the first camera to feature internal 32-bit float recording, meaning it makes feeding audio directly into the camera much more manageable and reliable than, yes, any other mirrorless or even docu-style camera. Your audio is protected from clipping or can be raised up if it's coming through too low, and while it's not 100% foolproof, it really is going to help reduce the times you have to reshoot shots or scenes for anything audio related. It gives you peace of mind. Essentially, it's made internal camera audio recording a thing, which was at one point the least trustworthy way to capture audio, to now one of the best ways to capture your audio, at least for run and gun work. Again, it's one of those simple yet genius innovations you ask, why hasn't anyone else done this? And while yes, Panasonic's newer cameras can do this with a rather expensive XLR unit, no one else is doing it directly into the camera. No additional accessories necessary. The ZR is yet again serving without the need for strap-ons. And look, I'm not sure how many people have mentioned this, but this might also be the best gimbal cam next to a Ronin 4D. And once again, it's arguable that this red code RAW will provide you a better image than the 4D's options. So let that percolate. Because the problem in the cinema world is how to make our cinema cameras portable enough to create fluid dynamic movement when they're the size of cinema cameras. Until now, you've had a couple of options. You nix your cinema camera and use something like an FX3 to get any gimbal shots, but you make a huge sacrifice in image quality in the process. The second option, without bringing in a Steadicam or dolly tracks, is an elaborate gimbal-style big rig that you mount your cinema camera to. But if you're flying something smaller like the Blackmagic 6K full frame, or a Pixis, or a Red Komodo on a gimbal, it quickly gets pretty backbreaking. It requires a lot of accessories around the gimbal to truly be functional, and it can be a pretty big headache. But if you're using the ZR, it alleviates almost all of those problems. It can run on a DJI RS3 Mini, stand alone. The body itself is so light you could probably run it on a gimbal all day without getting fatigued, and that LCD screen is so big you don't need a monitor. And of course, we can leverage its autofocus, which functions very, very well most of the time. Combine that with your red code RAW image, and you're really getting something that is unique in this form factor. Up until this point, something that has never really been done. But there's no need to take the ZR that seriously. It doesn't have to be a new A cam. In the past, I've used both the Blackmagic Pocket OG and the Sigma FP as very high quality travel cameras. But the ZR absolutely owns them both. Bigger screen, quality autofocus, and most importantly, IBIS. I don't know who needs to hear this, Canon, but cameras designed to be small are the cameras that need IBIS the most. If it's not available, you're just defeating the purpose of that small size. I can't imagine ever needing another camera for travel. Let's not forget this will take quality photos along with that video. The lightweight body is ideal for long treks, and this does have weather sealing on par with the Nikon Z6 III, so it's dust and drip resistant. And a lot has been made of this body, and we'll get into some of its problems very soon. But I do want to say that almost all of the issues with the ZR body are fixed very simply and very affordably with the new small rig cage. This is probably one of the best integrations of a cage with a camera from small rig. The cage gives you two 1/4-20 mounting points on the bottom for mounting a tripod securely. It gives you this really nice top handle with a rubber undergrip and an HDMI clamp to protect this little micro HDMI port. And it also adds a more substantial handle grip, which is so seamless that it actually feels like it's part of the camera body itself. Also, this is one of the first small rig cages that allows you to use the Poco Mofage PL mount adapter with enough clearance. I can't tell you how happy this makes me, as I use my Mofage anytime I shoot with cinema lenses, so it gets extra points for this. In fact, I would call it both the first and most essential additional purchase you can make for this camera, as it does truly negate any negatives that the original ZR body design is guilty of. And while the camera is missing some quintessential Red features like the Red UI and the Red traffic light system, it does offer a few things that no other Red camera has until this point. Apart from the obvious ones like true quality autofocus and IBIS, the first is that this camera is really good in low light. A Red camera good at low light? You never thought you'd see the day. Or night for that matter, because with a few exceptions in its lineup, Red users will all know that lighting is always key to getting a good image from a Red camera, more so than many other cameras, and as soon as you get into underexposed, poorly lit environments, the image quickly falls apart. But the ZR doesn't, because it has a second base ISO or high ISO value of 6400, which means you can really take it out into these low light environments and still get very serviceable, very nice looking images. All of these scenes were shot at night with only the ambient street lights. This might not be quite Sony level low light performance, but it is very good, and particularly by Red camera standards, it's amazing. Then there's the other new Red feature. The ZR can do 6K and 4K shooting modes without cropping in on the sensor, a feature not possible in previous Red cameras. Not only is it great to see this full frame look be applied across both 4K and 6K, it also means you can leverage more from your memory cards and extend your shoot times by simply switching into 4K mode without sacrificing the full frame field of view. From a 1TB card, you'll get around 1.5 hours in 6K, but almost 3 hours in 4K. In fact, the only time you need to crop in is to shoot in 120 frames per second, but you can shoot 60 frames per second in slow motion in the 6K full frame with no penalty. And one final thing that should be noted as a selling point for the ZR is it's a Z-mount system. Yes, Nikon works with third-party lens manufacturers. Yes, they also make some of the best first-party lenses in the world, which unfortunately are also some of the most expensive first-party lenses in the world, but they also offer some really affordable, less premium first-party options, which as a first-time Nikon user, I didn't realize. I picked up these two 28 and 40mm 2.8 retro inspired kit lenses for around $400 US and filmed practically everything you're seeing with them. They're all you need to get started. Again, perfect travel lenses, super compact and very lightweight. However, Nikon Z mount is unique in the fact that you can adapt many other mirrorless mounts to it, including the Holy Grail, Sony E-mount, which means not only do you have all of Nikon's lenses to choose from, but also the entire Sony lineup of lenses, which might be the most varied and diverse in camera history. I'm using the Viltrox Z to E-mount adapter, which is only $100, and I'm using all of my Sony glass. That means if you're coming from Sony land, like myself, and you have Sony lenses, the cost of switching to Nikon is the cost of that one adapter. And for some inexplicable reason, these adapters work much better on Nikon than other systems. It makes those Sony lenses perform almost as well as the native Nikon Z mount lenses with their autofocusing and in-camera controls fully functional and intact. It's really quite amazing. Then there's Nikon's massive back catalogue of F-mount lenses, which can be used as well with a separate adapter with similar high quality results. What this means is that between the first and third party native lenses and your adapted lenses, Nikon might have the biggest range of lenses and some of the most affordable range of lenses to choose from out of any brand of mirrorless camera system. And all of this low light, raw recording, high frame rating, 32-bit audio floating, autofocusing, rival brand lens adapting goodness is given to you for only $2,200 US. That's cheaper than the FX2. That's cheaper than the FX3. The C50, the C70, the C80, the Pixar 6K, the S1 II, the S1R2, among many others. Shall I continue? As a value proposition, I do not believe there is anything that provides this level of quality for this price. They may have just taken Blackmagic's disruptor and value for money crown with the ZR. In fact, because of how fresh this camera feels and its innovations, it reminds me a great deal of the Canon 5D Mark III era, when this style of camera truly emerged as a real budget alternative to actual cinema cameras of the time. This may well push the industry forward in a very similar way, and Nikon now have first seat at the new table. It's been over 10 years since the 5D Mark III, and the ZR is of course staggeringly better in every single measurable way, and yet somehow costs $1,300 less than the Canon 5D Mark III did well over a decade ago. You know, in case you're curious about Canon's pricing strategy. Oh, no.
Potatoes.
But I don't want to sell you only the dream. Those are the reasons that I bought the ZR, but there are certainly issues with this camera that shouldn't be ignored and that you need to know to go in with your eyes wide open. I have only had the camera for a week, and in my final review I'm sure I'll uncover more issues, but here are some of the ZR problems as of right now. No open gate recording mode. That's right, you can't shoot vertical and horizontal at the same time. Well, I mean, you can, you just have less vertical as you do it. Personally, I'm not overly bothered by this, as most of my clients still favor horizontal formats, but yes, in the future it's something that's nice to have. And more importantly, for anamorphic shooters such as myself, it's really beneficial for getting the most squeeze out of your image. And no, you don't get any type of anamorphic de-squeeze modes either, but perhaps we will get this in a firmware update. Don't potato us on this one, Nikon. Now, H.265 mode is not good. So while it's all well and good to talk about Red Code RAW, what happens when you want to shoot something a little less data hungry for smaller projects? Well, that H.265 codec is only 420, not 422 color space, and it's definitely a little bit lacking. Here are a few side-by-sides for your reference. Now, you do also have Nikon's NRAW and ProRes and ProRes RAW as alternatives to Red RAW, but they're all quite data heavy. This was my recent criticism of Blackmagic's new cameras. There just needs to be a nice compressed codec option. The ZR's H.265 has a lot of processing and noise reduction built in, seemingly worse than the Z6 III version. So while the ZR's Red RAW might be better than everyone else's RAW, its H.265 codec might be worse than everyone else's compressed codec. So it's all swings and roundabouts. All that being said, I think it's completely usable. It's just not quite as good as it should be. And look, you all know how I feel about over sharpening. The micro HDMI port. Yes, this has one. Yes, it's not nice. Are there ways to work around it quite easily with a clamp? Yes. Is it less of an issue if you plan on using the LCD screen only? Yes, but in 2026 perhaps we could ban cameras using them, like how we're trying to get rid of plastic straws. I mean, it does feel possible that they could have made this HDMI full size. The camera body does feel a bit cheap. Yes, there's just something about the body that doesn't feel great. The little groove where the handle grip should be is quite unsatisfactory. When you add the small rod cage, it's much better because you add that missing hand grip, but it's not the only issue. The battery door definitely feels a bit sticky and not super well constructed. And there's this weird issue where the CF Express cards themselves can stick in the camera after you've tried to release them, and then you kind of have to dig them out. It definitely feels like something has gone a bit wrong here, but I can't say what. And while the LCD touchscreen and hot shoe on this are great, it feels like maybe Nikon cut some corners in other areas of the ZR's body design and components as a result. And if you have a 3.5mm jack plugged in, it's going to stop your LCD screen from easily rotating. That is very annoying. Shadow flicker. Now, apparently this is also a problem on the Z6 III, but in the darkest area of some scenes, when they're really underexposed, you get this weird shadow flickering effect. It's not good, and it could definitely ruin certain scenes if you favor low light shooting. Normally it's fine, but I was really confused by it when I encountered it in this scene specifically. It's almost like the corner of the room is dancing. No focus peaking in Red RAW. Yep, for some reason, if you have focus peaking turned on and you're filming in Red RAW and you have the view assist turned on, you can't see your focus peaking. Obviously not ideal for those of us who like to use a lot of manual lenses, kind of an essential component for judging critical focus. Hopefully it's an easy firmware fix. Speaking of weird display problems, there is another issue that when you have a card that can film more than 2 hours and 5 minutes of red footage, the display won't tell you what your actual record runtime is. It will stay at 2 hours and 5 minutes until you shoot enough footage to get below that time limit. So before that time limit kicks in, it's total guesswork as to how much you've actually shot, which is a really strange problem and really annoying not to have an accurate measurement of your time remaining. Again, hopefully gets fixed very quickly via firmware. The record button also doesn't want to record. Now, hopefully this is a problem that's due to my lack of knowledge about Nikon settings, but I can't for the life of me improve this. The shutter button, which is also a record button, in video mode just doesn't work if you press it a certain way. If you press it too quickly or without enough pressure, it just won't start recording. Sometimes even if you press it more slowly, it won't start recording. And it does some type of like focus confirmation, which I've tried to turn off, but there's no recording happening. Likewise, when you hit record to stop recording, there's like a half-second lag before it registers. So then you think you haven't pressed it hard enough, so you press it again, which actually starts the recording again, and then you have to turn it off again, and then you...
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too.
Yes.
I've never found it so difficult to just start and stop recording on a camera. So please, in the comments, tell me if there's a way to fix this. The Nikon ZR is, for all intents and purposes, way more of a cinema camera than the FX3 was when it was released. However, it has the exact same problem as the FX3 upon its release, which is that it does not shoot true 24 frames per second. You know, the frame rate synonymous with cinema? Yeah, it doesn't do that. And you can't call yourself a cinema camera without shooting true 24p. Yes, it does have 23976. No, that is not the same. For day-to-day use, this probably wouldn't be a problem, but actually filming something that's meant to wind up in the cinema, it absolutely will become a problem in your post-production. So come on, Nikon, if you live by the gun, you die by the bullet. Don't call it cinema if you can't shoot in the true cinema frame rate. Exposure tools. Now, Red is famous for its traffic light exposure system. The ZR doesn't have this, which is disappointing, but it also doesn't have false color, which I would consider a critical option for use with this camera. Yes, you have waveform and histogram, but coming from the Panasonic S1 II, having false color would just make things so much easier. So please roll on a firmware update with something like this. Now, newer Red cameras have one of the best remote control apps on the market. Nikon ZR has one of the worst. The app is buggy, it's laggy, it disconnects all the time, it's limited, there's very few adjustments you can make through it to control your camera settings, and it's just a horrible thing to use. So come on, Nikon, you own the company that made the Red Control app. Get the Red Control app controlling this camera and let us make the most of this thing. The menu system is not good. While the Nikon menu system is not maybe as convoluted as either Panasonic's or Sony's menu system in terms of the amount of options it provides, it's still a mess. It's not that you can't use it, but it's just that a lot of these controls and settings are placed in really weird sub-menus that take forever to discover, and it's just not intuitive. It doesn't make logical sense, and a lot of times it feels like digging for a needle in a haystack. And again, Nikon, you have Red UI at your disposal. It's one of the best. Why not just try and incorporate some of that UI and make this quicker to tweak settings with? Red Code RAW is data hungry. Yes, there is always a price to filming in RAW, as I detailed in my ProRes RAW vs BRAW video. What you get in image quality, you pay for in storage space. This camera would absolutely benefit from some lower quality versions of Red Code RAW, and all other Red cameras do have lower quality settings. In saying that, in 6K you get about an hour and a half of record time from a 1TB card. On the S12 filming ProRes RAW you get 27 minutes at its highest quality. So is it really that bad? And if you film in 4K on the ZR you'll get almost 3 hours. So while I do think it would be great to get a medium and low quality option like the other Red cameras, it's still pretty good weighed against the alternatives. And perhaps the number one reason not to get the ZR is that it is obviously a warning shot. It's Nikon planting the first flag on the moon. It's Nikon getting its feet wet. But can you imagine how good their next mirrorless camera is going to be when they decide to bring the full noise? It's safe to say the ZR is a little rough around the edges. Hopefully, a lot of these things can be fixed through new firmware updates. But if you can deal with those pain points, this is one hell of a powerhouse mirrorless camera, and one of the most interesting in years, mainly because I would say it is the first mirrorless camera to offer an image that doesn't look like every other mirrorless camera. This is elevated mirrorless. This is bespoke mirrorless. This is artisanal mirrorless. This is so far the first mirrorless camera claiming to be a cinema camera that actually comes close to making good on that claim. The goal of new camera tech should be to provide new innovative tools to express yourself through the medium of moving images. What we normally get is rehashing of past cameras, often just a little bit better, sometimes a tiny bit worse. The ZR decided to really try and bring something different to the table. Granted, it might have been the table Blackmagic set for them, but nonetheless, Nikon might be sitting at the head of the table looking at everyone else thinking, now it's your turn. The streets is watching. If you found this video helpful, help me pay off my ZR debt by giving me a like and a sub. Use my Skillshare link and try your free membership today. And as always, I am the Savage, Nikon, Red Code RAW Filmmaker, and I'll see ya when I see ya.